Digestion takes place in the alimentary canal, also called the digestive tract or gastrointestinal tract. Basically, this structure is a tube that starts at the mouth and ends at the anus. Several vital organs and glands are connected to the alimentary canal and contribute digestive enzymes and other products to specific portions of the canal. Food is processed mechanically and/or chemically, depending on where it is in the alimentary canal. Mechanical digestion begins in the mouth, where the teeth grind down food, thereby increasing the surface area that's exposed to enzymes within the mouth. Chemical digestion also begins in the mouth, with the secretion of saliva from salivary glands located underneath the tongue. Saliva contains the enzyme salivary amylase, which breaks down carbohydrates. The esophagus transports food to the stomach, where mechanical and chemical processing continue. Food then enters the small intestine, where chemical processing is completed and the absorption of nutrients begins. The liver secretes substances required for the digestion of fats, and the gallbladder stores these substances before emptying them into the small intestine. The pancreas secretes enzymes and other substances into the small intestine to carry out chemical digestion. Finally, what's left of the food makes its way through the large intestine, where water is absorbed and feces are formed. Animals don't acquire nutrients as individual molecules, but instead must digest their food internally. They must extract nutrients from the food and eliminate wastes. Let's follow a meal as it travels through the alimentary canal. For simplicity, we'll divide our meal into its main macromolecules: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Digestion begins in the mouth, where both mechanical and chemical processing occurs. Chewing reduces the size of food particles, and enzymes secreted by the salivary glands begin the chemical digestion of carbohydrates. Once food is swallowed, a wave of muscular contractions called peristalsis propels the food particles through the esophagus to the stomach. Mucus secreted by cells that line the esophagus helps protect it from abrasion and lubricates the food during its passage. The human stomach is an expandable muscular sac capable of holding from 2 to 4 liters of food and liquids. Food is retained in the stomach by a ring of circular muscle, the pyloric sphincter, that separates the lower portion of the stomach from the small intestine. When food enters the stomach, muscular contractions churn it, mixing the stomach contents and reducing them to a soupy mixture of food and digestive enzymes called chyme. Most of the chemical processing that occurs in the stomach is the digestion of proteins. The gastric juice in the stomach is highly acidic, having a pH as low as 1.5. This acidic pH hastens the metabolism of proteins. In addition, many digestive enzymes are secreted by stomach epithelia. Mucus lining the gastric epithelium protects the stomach cells from denaturation and from damage by the stomach's own acid. The muscular churning also helps break up fat. However, because fats are insoluble in water, they tend to aggregate into large globules as they're churned. Peristalsis in the stomach walls moves small amounts of the partly digested material into the small intestine. There, secretions from the pancreas, including a form of amylase, are added to the mix. Pancreatic amylase continues the digestion of carbohydrates that began in the mouth. The cells lining the small intestine absorb the sugars that are broken down by pancreatic amylase. The epithelium of this organ is folded and covered with finger-like projections called villi. The cells that line the surface of villi have projections of their own called microvilli. The folds, villi, and microvilli of the small intestine greatly increase the surface area available for absorption. Nutrients such as glucose exit the lumen of the small intestine and enter the epithelial cells. The absorbed glucose exits the epithelial cells and enters the bloodstream, which carries it throughout the body. Protein digestion is completed in the small intestine with the aid of pancreatic enzymes. By the time the partly digested food reaches the end of the small intestine, short polypeptides have been broken down into individual amino acids. Cells lining the small intestine absorb amino acids in much the same way as they absorb glucose. The bloodstream then carries the amino acids to individual cells throughout the body. In addition to pancreatic amylase, the pancreas also secretes the enzyme pancreatic lipase. Lipase breaks down fats. However, before the molecules in the fat globules can be digested by enzymes, the globules must be broken up or emulsified. Bile is secreted by the liver and stored in the gallbladder. The gallbladder releases the bile into the small intestine, where the fat globules from food, lipase from the pancreas, and bile salts from the liver come together. The bile salts emulsify the large fat globules into small fat droplets. Fats that have been emulsified have more surface area exposed than do large clumps of fat. Thus, secretion of bile into the small intestine facilitates digestion because smaller emulsified fats are easier for enzymes to gain access to and digest. Pancreatic lipase breaks up the small fat droplets into monoglycerides and free fatty acids. Once fatty acids have been liberated, they're processed into protein-coated complexes and released into the bloodstream for transport to fat storage cells and other tissues throughout the body. By the time the processed material reaches the large intestine, much of the water and virtually all of the nutrients have been absorbed. Additional water is absorbed in the large intestine, and the solid material is compacted to form fecal waste.
All right, and that's it for this chapter. You should be able to describe the passage of food through the gastrointestinal tract from the mouth down to the anus and explain the function of each organ and accessory organ of the digestive system and describe any special structural features. Like I said back at the beginning, spend a little bit of time, spend a little bit of time with this. I'm going to get there. One moment. Here we go. Spend a little bit of time with figure 15.1. You should be able to walk through all of this. So when you look at those bullet points at the end of the chapter, basically what I want you to be able to do is put your hands over the words that you see on the sides and just walk through. You don't need to memorize everything word for word. I'm not asking you to do that. This looks like a lot of words to memorize. But you should be able to start with this little arrow here and go, hey, what is that? And what does it do? Well, that's the mouth. That's where we start this whole digestive process. We're going to use our teeth to chew the food. We're going to use our tongue to push the food down into the back of the throat. And that's what the mouth does. That's mechanical and chemical digestion. What do these salivary glands do? Well, they're going to secrete saliva. Well, what does saliva do? If saliva is going to moisten our food, it also is going to contain amylase to help break down carbohydrates into sugar. So you should be able to just, go through each one of these arrows and just give me a general idea of what's going on at each stage. All right, and that's all I have for this chapter.